Right away, the answer is yes, you can beat Dispatch without leveling up characters because you don't have to succeed. The story will progress whether you win or fail, but the real question is, can you beat the final boss without leveling up? And the answer to that is actually a bit more interesting than you might think. So here are the rules. 1, we are never leveling up any character whatsoever. We're just gonna let the number on the right-hand side pile up as high as we can. And 2, we are not upgrading any of their abilities. Nobody is visiting Blonde Blazer, especially not crazy ex-boyfriend Phenomenon. And lastly, we are not save scumming here. Yes, there's a lot of chances in this game, like getting your 30% breakers or whatever. We're just running it, okay? If we make it to the very end and we lose, we're gonna restart the entire game. You actually can't skip any of the cutscenes in Dispatch because the game is basically entirely cutscenes, so we are going to be spending as much time as we can trying to make it possible because I feel like that's the best way to experience a challenge like this. We can skip episode 1 because there's nothing in it that matters for this challenge, but episode 2 is where things get interesting. If you start off the very first mission with Flambe, you are 100% likely to succeed, and Flambe's power, where he gets better the more that he wins in a row, is going to be very crucial for this run, so it's great to get him started. Episode 2 is very easy, especially because the game expects you to have not really leveled up your characters. I did a perfect run, but I still only did better than 80% of other players, so that had me wondering if that was because I chose to hack instead of fully sending out one character. Maybe that had some sort of impact, or maybe episode 2 is so easy that it's not really possible anymore to be better than 90% or 100% of players. If you know the answer, I would love to know. Our huge success also instantly bumped us up to Junior Dispatcher level, which unlocks arguably the best power in the whole game, being able to take a character out of resting mode and instantly be able to use them again. I did not find that so many of my characters were injured enough or even taken fully out of commission to fully use the rest of the powers, so I'm a huge fan of it, and we're already like more than a third of the way done for the next level up too. So I didn't do a lot of prep work for this challenge, mostly because I was just scouting out how difficult it would actually be. I completely forgot how difficult episode 3 can be if you're not prepared for it. This is where all the teammates start to sabotage each other because in the story, the last place Z-Team member is going to get cut. That is so obnoxious because you'll start to pair people off, but then they won't actually show up to the actual mission, meaning that the solo people who show up just totally fail. It is honestly very difficult, but not so difficult that it's actually really challenging. If anything, the second half of episode 3 is where things get interesting because now you can finally level up synergy, which is a secret mechanic of sorts. Once you pair up two characters who have some sort of affection for each other, they start to do better, and that will actually increase their odds of success, which is going to be massive in this playthrough. So honestly, now is the time to start farming it because the sooner we get those synergies up, the better we're going to do in future missions. And actually, truthfully speaking, I think that first half of episode 3 is intentionally difficult because I still ended up doing better than 90% of players, which I think is pretty strong, especially since I'm not actually leveling up any skills or any abilities. Episode 4 starts off with a very saucy dream from Invisigal, who is pretty much dreaming that she can actually beat Blonde Blazer. We all know that she can't, so let her dream. It's all good. It also starts with a very censored and inappropriate message sent from Punch Up because unfortunately I did end up cutting his ex-girlfriend Coupe. I did theorize that Punch Up syncing up with Phenomenon would lead to very strong encounters, but honestly, the main reason I did this was because I kept Coupe in my first playthrough and I just wanted to see what playing with Sonar was like. I am very sorry to my little friend here, but for what it's worth, I do think that he would give some phenomenal advice to Phenomenon, so maybe they are actually the bromance that we really need. If you're curious, let me explain just a bit more. So, Malevola and Sonar pair up, and so does Coupe and Punch Up. When you cut one of those characters, that means that the other partner loses their bestie. But whichever character you recruit later, whether that's Waterboy or Phenomenon, will be able to sync up with the lacking character. It would be interesting if the late game edition in episode 8 could sync up with Blonde Blazer, but I don't actually think that's the case, mostly because of Phenomenon and story reasons. I too think I would be clinically depressed if I lost out on a baddie like her, but on the subject of syncing up, throughout this episode, I am able to maximize the sync level of both Flambe and Prism, as well as Malevola and Sonar. This is hugely important, and it is worth mentioning that, yeah, obviously, we are picking Phenomenon for this challenge. I don't actually think it's possible to do with Waterboy, considering he would jump into so many missions where he would obviously fail because he won't actually have the extra stats that you get from leveling him up. He will be a literal wet sponge, though it would be kind of interesting to try him in a future playthrough, considering this was honestly pretty easy overall. And make no mistake, Phenomenon does have his downside. Sure, he starts off insanely powerful and he's got incredibly fast speed and quick recovery time, but his depression is a very scary and real thing. It does trigger a decent amount when you're not leveling up your characters. What I really got in the habit of doing was not clicking on the results of very sketchy dispatches, because if he sees any failure whatsoever, he'll actually drop out of a mission that he's currently a part of to go and be depressed. But if you make sure that he finishes everything he's up to, you can just stall the call and click on all of those dispatches later. The characters will still spend the same amount of time resting up at base, so you're not missing out on too much here until you absolutely need to use them for a future run. I was not so great about this at first, but the more I played around Phenomenon's weaknesses, the more comfortable I got with using him more efficiently. We definitely did crush it though. We ended episode 4 doing better than 90% of players, though I do think on this particular episode, many players do pick Waterboy, which would be way harder than picking Phenomenon, so I think the results are a little bit skewed if I'm being honest. And going against my better judgment, we do end up seeing the movie with Invisigal, which even I can begrudgingly admit is an extremely cute scene, possibly the cutest scene in all of Dispatch. The reason why I chose her for this is because I was very curious if later on having a strong relationship with Invisigal might affect certain story moments, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Episode 5 was pretty straightforward. I was able to maximize the Invisigal and Golem sync, which was pretty notable. It's also funny to note that because I'm not sending any of my heroes out to meet with Blonde Blazer, only Phenomenon could fly.
Humans are fascinating. They cannot fly, and yet they attempt to anyway.
I wasn't really able to save the airplane from that option. Thankfully, saving it from the ground is actually pretty straightforward. There is a very real choice here though, and that is to not reveal that you're Mecha Man. The reason why is because if you do, Flambe gets really pissed off and he will not show up at all for the next mission. As I've already discussed, Flambe is incredibly powerful. Being able to grow his points even temporarily is very powerful, and because he's paired up with Prism, the two of them together can actually fill 3 slots and do a lot of powerful work. They are easily the best combo we have, unless you're counting Phenomenon not being depressed with Punch Up, who is of course very strong too. However, we are now starting to see the downsides of not leveling up our team whatsoever. We only did better than 30% of other players. By episode 6, we get our last fully synced up team between Punch Up and Phenomenon. Finally, they are a great team together. They basically max out their stats without actually leveling up anything. I don't have too much to say about it either. I did better than 70% of players. I don't know how I did better than episode 5, but I guess that's just the breakers with luck. There is honestly quite a bit of luck involved once you've got no ability to influence stats. And I hate to admit that we did dance with Invisigal, but again, I have a good reason to say it. Don't start bashing me, Blonde Blazer fans, because I promise that I am among you. But okay, episode 7 is where things get really interesting. So first off, I'm able to get my achievement for picking a cigar in the flashback. That's pretty nice. After a pretty stressful dispatch mission, of which I only did better than 40% of other players, we do have a very difficult choice to make. So most players are not going to cut Invisigal, and the game will note that the team loses morale as a result of that choice. And that is pretty notable in the final episode because you're going to need every stat you can get. My thought was, okay, let's cut Invisigal, but if I spend the entire game increasing my stats with her, it's possible that that might actually be enough for her to continue joining the team. I am not that experienced with all of Dispatch's permutations, so I thought that this was an interesting gambit to make. Unfortunately, that is not true. If you cut Invisigal, not only will she not show up in episode 8, but you are also basically guaranteed to have a bad ending. Yikes. However, my team has high morale, so yay, I guess. We are finally at the most difficult part of the challenge. We spent hours and hours of unskippable dialogue and cutscenes to make it to episode 8, where there is a final boss with Coupe or Coupe, depending on how cool you are. It starts off very difficult because you've only got 3 characters, and if you pair them up together, you're not actually going to be able to reach some of those other options either. At a certain point, we are forced to get Waterboy back on the team, which is honestly decent. He's just going to add like 1 point to every other fight that you can go to. you do get one freebie as well. The very first time you fail after actually encountering Coupe in her boss fight, our favorite baddie, Blonde Blazer, shows up to save the day, and she is extraordinarily powerful. She is one of the best ways to fight against the boss and also protect the team from incidental damage. One funny upside to this level 1 no abilities challenge is that you can actually do pretty decently against the auto fail dispatch missions. Players might remember that certain dispatch missions have certain thresholds that if you pass it will result in an auto fail. Obviously, having lower skills will make it so that you're way more reasonable of actually pulling them off. And also, your synergy bonuses won't actually affect that either. So if you are right at the cusp of it, don't be afraid to send out two people who are baddies with each other. They are absolutely going to have a better time solving it than not. Because some of Coop's missions have these auto fails, we are actually in decent shape regarding that. But make no mistake, this was still a very difficult challenge. Because we never got Invisigal back, Golem was near worthless. And even with stalling the call, Phenomenon had a lot of opportunities to be depressed. It's worth noting you can use your dispatch skill to heal his depression by taking him out of rest. That is something I did pretty much throughout the entirety of the playthrough, but was extremely notable when you make it to the final mission because there's just so many things happening and you do not have the manpower to actually succeed even half of these things. Now, hearing all this, you might think, wow, I must have done horribly on that final mission. But no, surprisingly, I did better than 40% of dispatch players without leveling up, adding any sort of skills or anything like that. It was just friends doing friend things. Yeah, 40% seems very high. In fact, throughout the entirety of this playthrough, I did better than 70% of dispatch players. I don't even know what to say, other than, honestly, Dispatch itself is not a very difficult game. There aren't extra story moments or things related to your performance, so there's not really an incentive for you to do better at the game. In fact, I know that this was more or less intended to be a TV show, so you can give it to your mom who's never played a video game, knowing that she'll still enjoy it if she fails, provided she's okay with vulgarity or profanity. It is cool that you can censor and bleep that kind of stuff out. The final number, as far as level ups go, on my right-hand side was 58. It could be kind of a fun challenge to see how high of a number you can get, so that might be something to think about. But yeah, as far as final notes go, just as I said earlier, pairing up Flambe with Prism is just so insanely powerful. Prism giving you that duplication that lets you fill up the 3-squad teams, Flambe getting stronger and stronger with his snowball fire ability. And yeah, Phenomenon plus Punch Up is super, super strong. I do wonder how Phenomenon would do with Malevola in the future, and in fact, I really did have a lot of fun with this challenge run, so I'm considering doing an only perfect dispatch mission run. I would have a lot of fun theorizing which routes you need to take as far as which characters to cut, which ones to add. Let me know in the comments what you think would be cool as far as theories go. I'm especially interested in ranking the abilities of leveling up all of your characters and also those bonus points as far as adding them. Maybe some of them are extremely crucial for future missions. Again, if that sounds fun, do let us know in the comments. As always, I'm Scoutmaster Demi. I know this is not a Blueprints video, but as 2026 approaches, we are doing our best to transition to just indie games in general. I'm working really hard on a video covering the 20 plus indie games that I played this year. I hope you're looking forward to it. If that sounds great, feel free to subscribe and let us know how we're doing in our wonderful Discord. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for caring, and I'll see you by the campfire.